Hello everyone, thank you for watching. Before we get started, I just ask that you like and subscribe to my channel. It's quick and easy, and it'll make me really happy. So, let's get on with it. I was sitting at the table when I saw the 12 people who had decided my fate return to the boardroom. One of the female jurors looked at me and smiled, but the others avoided my gaze and kept a straight face. The judge said, "Defendant, please stand up," when everyone had taken their seats, so I stood up with my lawyer and the chairman of the jury. An older black woman gave the bailiff a piece of paper with the verdict. The bailiff then went to the bench and gave the paper to the judge, who read it, folded it, and handed it back to the bailiff, who returned it to the jury. During this time, I looked around the courtroom and saw Cindy, the woman I loved and who loved me. She smiled and raised both hands, each with fingers crossed. I looked at my lawyers, who seemed to me to have conducted a very. One of the lawyers smiled and gave me a reassuring squeeze. I looked across the aisle at my mother and sister, who weren't smiling. I wondered what they were thinking. How controversial was this case for them? I hadn't spoken to any of them for over a year, so I didn't know. See, I killed my brother. That's indisputable. One night I shot him after he broke into my house. From my point of view, it was self-defense. The defense said he was armed with a baseball bat and had repeatedly threatened me over the previous month. However, the prosecution claimed that I ambushed him and shot him in cold blood since he was an important person, a prominent businessman and a state representative. They made an active accusation against me. All this flashed through my mind in just a moment, and then my attention was brought back to the present by a voice from the bench. Did the jury reach a verdict? The people find the accused, Scott Luke. Her name was Cindy Duncan, and I fell in love with her at first sight. I soon discovered that the feeling was mutual, which I had suspected from the very beginning. We both looked at each other with an expression of "oh my God," and I felt my stomach ache and that nervous. I was a bit unsure about the whole thing at first. I loved her and I knew I wanted to be with her, but she was my brother's fiancée. I'd met her 6 weeks before their wedding. I was really confused. I was at my parents' house for my sister's bachelorette party in her honor in the days leading up to the wedding. I could see the confusion on her face as she tried to decide whether to go for it. By that time, though, both she and her family had already invested too much in the wedding for her to refuse, so she married A. I really believed that she didn't love Cindy. She's such a decent person that I truly believe she tried her best to fight the attraction between us, at least for a while. She tried her best to be an obedient wife to Gordon, but I had no such obligations. I have never felt the slightest guilt for loving my brother's wife. I did waver in my desire to get her for myself. I know that sounds incredibly selfish, but read my story, find out about me, my brother and Cindy, and then decide for yourself. There's not much to tell, so be patient. To say that my brother and I didn't get along would be a gross understatement. We were like oil and water. We were actually more than one person. We were called Cain and Abel, and it depended on which side you were on which of us acted in which role. My father, Gordon Luke Jr., inherited the family textile factory, which was founded by his grandfather in the late 19th century. My father saved this company and the economy of the medium-sized city in which it is located and where I grew up. He completely renovated the factory and brought the company into retail, opening stores in dozens of malls from coast to coast in the course of this process. He also received an already considerable fortune and multiplied it many times over. The problem was that it practically robbed him of any real chance of becoming a father, at least for me. I was the middle child with all the accompanying baggage. The city in which it is located and where I grew up was huge. He completely renovated the factory and brought the company into retail, opening stores in dozens of malls from coast to coast. In the course of this process, having already received a considerable fortune, he multiplied it many times over. The problem was that it practically robbed him of any real chance of becoming a father, at least for me. You see, I was the middle child with all the accompanying baggage. Gordon was the golden boy, the namesake of the head of the family, and it was he who received the most attention from our mother. She came from one of the oldest and most famous families in the area and was very full of herself. I was 23 months younger than Gordon, then we had a younger sister, Karen, 3 years younger than me. All the attention that my father paid to us children went to Karen. His father eventually accepted Gordon when it became obvious that they looked like two peas in a pod. Gordon followed the family. Gordon was the one who got involved in the business. Karen went to law school and became the legal expert of the company. They were both happy and eager to integrate into the corporate culture that was my father's trademark. I didn't get much attention from my parents, but I was fine with that. I've always been different from Gordon and Karen, and it was nice for me and my personality to be left alone. I've always marched to the beat of my own drum. While my brother and sister were loud, aggressive and assertive, I was quiet, introspective and completely uninterested in the family business or the family's money from a very young age. I had a natural talent for working with my hands, and one of the few indulgences that I received from my parents when I was growing up was my own workshop and any tool that I wanted. At the same time, I became interested in music and learned to play the guitar at an early age. Like any teenager, I played rock and roll for a while, but at 17 I discovered bluegrass and fell in love with it. I immersed myself in this subculture and decided to combine my two passions by making tools for a living. I spent 4 years as an apprentice to a foreman in the Tennessee mountains and learned a lot. As a craftsman, I managed to develop a good business, and I still play and go to street fairs from time to time. I also sell my work at other events. I make every piece by hand, and over the years I've made a lot of guitars, both acoustic and electric, banjos, mandolins, balalaikas, and even a few violins and violas from my family. I've always wanted to be successful and to make things to the highest possible standard. When I take an order for a tool, I always make sure that it's as perfect as I can make it. I've never become rich from my chosen profession, but I live quite comfortably, and I'm happy doing what I love. At least I did until the state decided to try me for my brother's death. Of course, all this doesn't really explain why my brother and I couldn't get along. Simply put, he was a bully and I was a rebel, and this conflict has lasted as long as I can remember. Gordon was always bigger and stronger than me and he beat me regularly until one day I almost bit off his ear in defense. That happened when I was 13 and he was 15. Then Gordon left me alone, sort of, and we reached and I think he was already thinking about becoming a politician. He probably decided it wasn't worth presenting himself as a bully. He never lost his temper, and that's what ended up costing him his life. I'd be lying if I said I never lose my temper. But my temper is colder and more controlled. I'm a pacifist by nature, but I'm also a realist. I'm not impudent. I used my name to get a bank loan for materials to build my own house. It's a 2-bedroom log cabin in the countryside outside the city. I built a log cabin in the countryside outside the city. I did most of the frame and log work myself, but I signed contracts for plumbing, electrics and finishing because of where I lived and because of my connection to country music. I became something of an outdoor enthusiast as a result. It suits me and my lifestyle. My temperament also affected my appearance. I grew up to be 6 feet 7 inches, still falling short of Gordon's 6 feet 8 inches. However, I was tall enough, and I developed an interest in aerobics and a passion for hiking. This gave me a lean, wiry physique. I used to have very long hair, but I cut it a few years ago. Now, a thick beard is my only concession to Gordon was always a bit of a maverick. He did everything he had to do in school, got great grades, went to college and then grad school. He took over a company that his father was supposed to retire from, but his dad had a heart condition and he retired early. Then he died when I was 31. By that time, Gordon had become president of the company and was actively involved in politics. He met Cindy while he was at his first job. She worked in accounting, and he quickly set his sights on her. I doubt he loved her, but she certainly looked good on his arm as a trophy wife. Cindy is just gorgeous. She's tall and red-haired. Cindy is a tall, red-haired girl with big, expressive eyes. She has a wonderful personality, warm and caring, but she is quite shy. I never understood what she saw in Gordon, but I'm biased because of my lifelong dislike of my brother. In fact, Gordon was quite handsome with the physique of an athlete and a charismatic personality. He could and did charm anyone when he wanted to. I found out that he did it quite often, of course. Cindy and Gordon were from a wealthy family, which I'm sure played a part in their relationship and in the family's status in society. Cindy was 25 at the time and had gone on a few dates, but not as many as you might think. She says her family really wanted her to charm Gordon when he showed interest in her. Her family isn't poor, but they're not rich either. But they weren't exactly rolling in it either. The idea of Cindy marrying into Luke's family was very attractive, and she agreed until she met me. Then everything became a bit less clear. I was 23, I'd just started an independent life, and I was bowled over by her looks and charm. She and I have a lot more in common than she and Gordon did. We have very similar characters and similar tastes in music, politics and other interests. When we got to know each other better, it didn't take her long to realize that she had married the wrong Luke. I turned down the opportunity to move to Nashville, California, where my business could grow significantly. I wanted to stay close to home so that I could be as close to her as possible and be a part of her life. After 3 years of marriage, Cindy had her first daughter, Sarah, and 2 years later, she had a second girl, Mary. Then, her tubes were tied because she'd realized she didn't want more children with Gordon. Fortunately, girls look like their mother, both in appearance and character, and they're the most valuable thing in the world. Cindy turned out to be a wonderful mother and a stay-at-home at the time. Cindy was a stay-at-home mother who seemed to have found the right balance between love and discipline. Cindy was a home mother who seemed to have found the right balance between love and discipline. I'm not sure when Gordon started physically abusing her. He was constantly fighting with her about one thing or another, and I know he drank a lot, but I didn't connect it with violence until one day I went into the house and she had a small bruise on her cheek. I want to be clear that I was there legally since I could do minor home repairs. Cindy always called me if there were problems. Gordon never had the time or desire to do this kind of work, so he assigned it to me because he knew I'd do it for almost nothing and do everything right. I always did what they asked and never bothered Cindy when she was home alone. I was strongly tempted on this particular day, but I was delivering a couple bags of concrete for repairs that I was going to do, and I spent a few days in their backyard and noticed that Cindy was very quiet and depressed. I saw a bruise on her cheek and asked her about it, but she just turned away. By that time, they had been married for 11 years and Gordon had already won a seat in the State House of Representatives. He was very conservative and his family values platform resonated in the suburban neighborhood where they lived. I asked her about it again. She mumbled something about accidentally bumping into the door and that there was nothing to worry about. I didn't believe it for a minute, but I left it because it was clear that she didn't want to talk about it. Shortly after this, I was in a bar in one of the hotels in the city center where I was meeting with a client about a possible job when Gordon entered with some blonde. He didn't see me and I watched him treat a young woman to a few drinks and then walk away with her in the direction of the elevators. Besides beating his wife, he also cheated on her. I was burning up very slowly from it. There's a woman here that I just adored with 2 beautiful daughters. He's acting like the Gordon of old. This time I plucked up the courage and called Cindy. I told her what I had seen. I said I knew he had beaten her. I told her that if she ever needed. Cindy said, "Scott, I appreciate you. I'm not sure I can leave him. He'll never tolerate this, and he has powerful friends. Please don't get involved in our problems. I can handle it. Cindy, you're as much a family to me as he is, maybe even more. The girls are my nieces. They're as close to my own children as I can possibly have. This is my problem, Cindy. I love you and I always will. When you're ready, I'll be there. I'll always be there for you. Scott, I love you too. I'm glad you're in my life." After I hung up, I sat back, thought about my options and realized I didn't have any. No matter how much I loved Cindy or wanted her, I wasn't going to persuade her to commit adultery. I respected her too much. I respected myself too much to do something like that. I wouldn't do anything to involve S in an adulterous affair. That would put me on Gordon's level. It would make me no better than him. There was one thing I was proud of. I considered myself morally superior to my brother. That may sound arrogant, but that's what I thought. I have a pretty rigid sense of decency, at least when it comes to relationships. That's because of my feelings for Cindy. I have never tried to start a full-fledged relationship with another woman. If I were to start a relationship with another woman, I wouldn't be able to say that I had feelings for her that I didn't have for Cindy. I had a great life among my friends and acquaintances in the music business. There were several women with whom I had relationships, but they were always strictly physical. Many of them were divorced. I was burned by love and just wanted intimacy without commitment. In the end, I decided the best course of action would be to hire an investigator on the sly and collect as much dirt on my brother as possible. I needed it in case something happened, and I'm very glad I did it. I also talked to Gloria Miller, a friend who was a former lawyer. I told her about a friend who was in an abusive relationship and asked where she could turn to escape her husband. I didn't say who it was, only that her husband was prominent and influential. Thanks to Gloria, I learned the name, number and address of the city shelter for victims of domestic violence. That was all I could do for Cindy, this and wait. From Cindy's perspective, she needed to protect herself financially. Gordon deliberately cut her off from independent sources of income. He refused to give her a job and gave her a very meager allowance. She said that he structured his assets so that they were not considered common property. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but the bottom line is that if she divorces him, she'll get very little. What's more, she was worried that Gordon would challenge her custody of the girls, which was ridiculous. Gordon had little interest in his daughters, he wanted boys, but they became a great photo shoot when it came time to run for public office. In fact, in her opinion, Gordon cleverly arranged everything. He made sure she couldn't afford to take care of her daughters properly, so he got custody. He even managed to make it look like he was a better parent than me. I was the one who went to their performances, football matches and school events. I was often invited to babysit too. I was happy to babysit, and I loved spending time with them. They're great kids, and they love their Uncle Scott. I have to admit that I wasn't entirely altruistic in doing this, as it gave me the chance to be with Cindy. But I remembered how indifferent my parents were to me, and I wanted to be the one man in Sarah's life. Mary's life. Luke, who would behave like a dad, so for the next 18 months I watched and waited. I watched with pain in my heart as the woman I truly loved sank into depression. It seemed that Gordon, with his constant insults, had suppressed her radiant personality to such an extent that she rarely smiled. I also waited while I was gathering information about my ex. I found out that he had a regular mistress at the state capitol, whom he saw when the legislature was in session. She clearly didn't mind sharing a bed with unfamiliar pickup trucks, men and women encountered while on the street. I was worried about Cindy's health, but as it turned out, I shouldn't have been. I knew it was only a matter of time, but I wasn't prepared for the suddenness. In fact, it was Gordon who pushed her to the point. It was a stormy night when he got back from a heavy binge. I only learned bits and pieces of what happened, but as far as I could understand, he came home drunk and beat her up. This time, he really did it. All I knew was that late one night I was awakened from a dead sleep by someone banging on the door of my cabin in the depths of the forest. I looked at my watch, it showed 4:27. I was curious who it could be until it suddenly dawned on me that the only person I knew. It was Cindy at the door at this early hour, and I knew it wouldn't be good. She was with the girls, who were clinging to her, and there were several suitcases around them. They were all soaked, and it was cold. Cindy looked terrible. She had a bruise under her eye, her nose was bloody, she had a cut on her cheek from his slap, a split lip, and later I found bruises on her side. He had slapped and punched her, and also pushed her hard against the dresser. Cindy was in a state of complete hysteria, and the girls were crying too. I took them inside, lit a fire in the fireplace, changed their clothes, and made them hide under blankets until they were warm. Then I put them to bed. They were almost in shock because they had been woken up by the commotion and had seen everything. My heart almost broke when Mary, who was only 7, said she didn't like father as Gordon insisted they call him and asked if I could be her dad from now on. I told her I'd always tried to be a dad to her and that I loved her and Cindy as if they were my own. I suggested she try to get some rest because we'd have a lot to do tomorrow. I found Cindy still sitting in front of the fireplace, unable to muster the strength to get up. Dressed and wrapped tightly in a plaid, Cindy was still trembling but her eyes had an empty expression. I sat down next to her on the floor and said, "Cindy, I'm sorry. She snapped, "Oh Scott," and buried her face in my shoulder. I silently hugged her, and something moved in my groin. I don't know exactly how it happened, but suddenly we started kissing with the passion of longtime lovers. My hands had a life of their own, fluttering over her gorgeous body despite my principles. No matter what, my body screamed at me to go for it, and I think Cindy did too. But before I could rush forward, we broke off our embrace and I stepped back. "I'm sorry," I said, turning purple. "I got carried away. We can't do that, not now." "There's no need to apologize," Cindy said with a mysterious smile. "God, you have no idea how long it's been since I've kissed a man when it made any difference. Scott, please help me. I honestly think Gordon. I was close to losing my cool tonight and I'm worried he'll do the same when he finds out I took the girls and left him. I've told you for a while that I'll always be there for you." I said softly, "I'm ready to help you in any way you need. All you have to do is ask." I gave her the name of the shelter that Gloria had given me a few months ago. She said we would call there first. "I'll be in the office in the morning and I can talk to her about starting the divorce process." Cindy said that she was finally ready to end her marriage with Gordon. She said that she shouldn't have married him and that I'm twice as good as him. She said that she should have listened to her heart when it told her that I was the one she really wanted. "Cindy, don't blame yourself. There was a lot of pressure on you to marry Gordon. You still didn't know me very well and you made a decision based on what you knew at the time. There's no point in looking back. All we can do is look forward and do our best." Then I helped her up, put her in her nightclothes and put her to bed. She looked exhausted, but before that I took out my camera and took a photo of her injuries to have on record. I wanted to get clear documents confirming Gordon's abusive behavior while she and the children were sleeping. I wandered around the apartment watching the time drag on. I was also worried about what Gordon would do when he found out Cindy was gone. He was a winner in everything all his life, so I sincerely believed that emotionally he would not be able to survive the loss of Cindy, especially because of me. This feeling was confirmed the very next day, and it was from this that the fatal trial. I started the day off by waking up Cindy and the girl and telling them they had to go to the shelter. I followed them in my Jeep and took them to safety while we were there. Gloria met us and we worked out a plan to get Cindy out of her marriage. Then I went home and started working on the tools I was going to make. I tried to put away anything that might indicate Cindy's presence because I had a feeling that Gordon would appear. On the same day, I saw him in the window of my workshop. He didn't stop to knock on the door or anything, but just stormed in as if he owned the place. I looked at his face and, to be honest, I was scared. "Where is she?" Gordon asked sharply. "Hello to you, big brother," I replied as calmly as I could. "What do I owe this rare gift of your presence?" "Cut the crap," he growled. "Is she here?" "Where is she?" I replied, "Cindy, you know her. She's my wife. I know she was here because I saw the tread of her car at the entrance. She came running to you last night because that's what she does when she needs sympathy. She runs to my loving brother. Do you think I don't know about you and her? Do you think you haven't seen the looks you exchange and the conversations you have? You know, when you think no one is around. I want to know how long you've been using my wife, Gordon." "You've got it all wrong," I said evenly. "I've never touched her. Unlike you, Cindy takes her marriage vows seriously. I respect her too much to talk her into something she doesn't want. She doesn't want to cheat, which I can't say about you." "That's a damn lie," he said, and he started to approach me in a threatening way. I said, "I know all about you and your cheaters. I know about your favorite." I was looking for something to defend myself with. "I also know about the beatings. You're not a very good man if you have to beat up a woman to prove your case. That's all." He rushed at me, and the only thing that stopped him was a large axe which I accidentally bumped into. As he rushed at me, I held the axe in front of me and there was fire in my eyes. "If you don't want me to cut you into small pieces, you better, off and get out of my house," I said loudly. "If you know what's good for you, you better tell me where she is." Gordon shouted, over my dead body. I shouted back, "That can be arranged." He replied, "Are you threatening me?" I asked, "Take it any way you want." "Any way you want," he said, apparently realizing that he had gone too far. "Just know that if my wife and children don't come home by noon tomorrow, I'll charge you with kidnapping. Then you better be ready to answer to the charge of domestic violence." I held the axe at the ready and said, "I saw what you did to her last night, and you have a lot to answer for. I'm sure the media will like it." A conservative representative with family values has been accused of beating his wife. It's a great photo shoot, but leave her alone. Gordon or the media will get the photos, and this isn't a threat. It's a promise. I wasn't going to not give the police and everyone else the photos. I was going to ruin my brother. I ruined him well. In my opinion, it was the right thing to do. As soon as Gordon left, I called Gloria and told her that Cindy and the kids needed to be moved to a safe place. I didn't know where, so I could be honest when asked where they were. Then he called the shelter and told Cindy to be ready to move as soon as Gloria arrived. I knew the orphanage wasn't a safe place for Cindy. I was sure that Gordon, as a legislator, he knew about this place or knew how to find out its location, and he did come and look for them for a long time after they ran away. That day, I was sitting in my workshop and reviewing the events that had just happened when I made an important decision. I realized that the solitude in the village, which I had always cherished, now posed a threat. I needed a way to protect myself in case Gordon, if the prosecution had shown up again in my murder trial, they would have done a lot of what I did next. However, I only did what I thought was right, as I said before. I'm a pacifist by nature and am not prone to anger. However, I'm also a realist, and I'm not going to sit back and let Gordon attack Cindy and me with impunity. So, I drove to the other side of town to a gun store and got myself a gun. I looked at a lot of different options and settled on a 9mm Glock. I wanted something that could take down a man with one shot if necessary. I realized that a 22 or 38 caliber pistol wasn't suitable for what I needed. I had to wait 48 hours before I could finalize the purchase. At that time, the police visited my house in search of information about Gordon. Cindy pressed charges and filed for divorce. I provided the additional evidence they needed. Of course, as expected, when Gordon was arrested, it made the front page. He said he was innocent and that she had been beaten by her lover. Given the evidence gathered by the police, it was a defense that most practical observers did not buy. It was difficult, but I knew I had to stay as I tried to stay away from Cindy as much as possible because I knew Gordon had the resources to keep an eye on me. While their divorce was being disputed, he pestered me with phone calls and emails. I also received dozens of calls and emails from his angry constituents, who called me a liberal, outspoken, who wants to destroy a strong voice in defense of family values. In fact, I had to laugh at the thought that Gordon had nothing to be jealous of. But his campaign of harassment started costing me my job. The struggle with Gordon in the divorce case was no less painful. She rented a small house in a quiet neighborhood under an assumed name and got a job. Then she sent the girls to live with one of her two sisters, who lived in. I think Gordon's legal team, including Karen, advised him that it would not look good if it was suspected that he was stalking Cindy and threatening me. Therefore, he retreated a little and did everything possible to delay both the criminal case and the divorce. Cindy, however, stayed away from him, kept him in the dark about where she lived and made sure that she was not in any danger. In the end, everything was handled through lawyers. When it came to a fight, Gordon had to admit that he didn't dispute the charge of domestic violence and eventually gave in to the divorce settlement. Cindy just wanted freedom and custody of the girls, and that's pretty much all she got. Gordon didn't bother to show up to sign the final divorce settlement, which seemed strange to me after it was over. I invited Cindy and the girls to lunch, and then we went to have ice cream the following Saturday. That was 2 days after the final divorce. Cindy found a babysitter, and I invited her on our first official date. She looked so good when I picked her up that night. It was a beautiful autumn evening in the middle of October, and she looked like $1 million. We had dinner, and then drove to the top of the hill next to my house. We sat under the stars and looked down at the lights of the city. We looked up at the stars and the city lights together. When you make a wish, I heard Cindy humming softly, then she pulled me to her and we kissed slowly at first. Our time had finally come, and I couldn't wait. I put my tongue in her mouth and felt her body tremble. I pulled her body towards me and let my hands wander. This time I didn't stop. I covered her breasts with my palms and felt her hand. I put my hand on her thigh and said, "Let's go back to my place." She nodded and followed me. When we got back to my place, we looked like a couple who had just gotten married. I locked the door behind us. Fortunately, it had a bolt. When we were in my bedroom, I turned on the bedside lamp and looked into Cindy's eyes. In those luminous eyes, I saw a reflection of all the hopes. She was looking forward to a new life with someone who really loved her, like me. Gone was the blank expression of depression that had clouded her eyes for months before she left Gordon. It was replaced by an excitement I hadn't seen in a long time. I walked up to her from behind, unzipped her dress and let it fall to the floor. Her breasts were covered by a thin black bra, which did little to hide her charms. She took off my shirt and then my trousers. By this point, we were already breathing heavily, ready to finally bring to an end the passion that we had been holding back for so long. We undressed and got into bed, as if we were trying to be seductive to finish the job. There is a moment in a snowy dawn when Jack Crab has just met his new son after spending the night with his wife's 3 sisters. This is in accordance with the best Cheyenne custom. It was a moment when everything in his life was perfect. He had a beautiful wife, a newborn baby, and a satisfying life with the Indians. Then, just a few minutes before Custer and the 7th Cavalry descended on the camp and destroyed everything in their path, including his wife and newborn child, things took a turn. That's about how the next few moments unfolded for me. I was lying in bed, having finally received the woman I had been in love with for many years. I was finally free from her abusive husband. I was going to have her and her 2 daughters, whom I'd always loved as my own. My life was perfect. Then Custer showed up in the form of my brother. I was lying in a sweaty aftertaste when I heard a noise from the front room. I got up and took the gun from the bedside table. I wasn't going to take any chances. I'd barely crossed the threshold. I was in my bedroom when I felt something hard hit me in the stomach. I doubled over in pain and rolled back into the bedroom. I was lucky to have the gun with me and managed to avoid the blow that Gordon struck with an aluminum baseball bat. Cindy screamed when she saw Gordon appear in the doorway. He shouted, "You're a lying sack of ___." He said that we couldn't even wait for the ink to dry before we started living together. "You didn't think you could beat me, Gordon, but I always win." Cindy shouted, "Please go away. I'm not your wife anymore, and I can do whatever I want. Do you think I care what some judge says?" Gordon raged, "Do you think you can just walk away from me, take my children, and not face the consequences? You're my wife until I say otherwise. Now I'm going to take what a husband takes from his wife." He started toward the bed. But he stopped when I stood up holding the gun in front of me. "Gordon, get out of my house before I shoot you. I'll take her home where she belongs. I don't care what you 2 think, or what some liberal judge thinks. Cindy belongs to me, and I'm definitely not going to lose her because of you." "That was a bad move, Gordon." I pulled the trigger, and the first shot hit him in the right shoulder. He staggered back, and a shocked expression appeared on his face as if he could not believe that I had actually shot him. Then his face darkened, and he raised the bat with his left hand came up to attack me, but he only managed to take a couple of steps because I calmly pulled the trigger again and this time knocked him down with a shot to the heart. He was dead even before he hit the floor. You see, I didn't just buy a gun and keep it with me. I've been practicing with it a lot. One of the advantages of living in the country was that I could go out the back door and shoot targets. I had the chance to practice whenever I wanted. I still had to practice shooting at a tree and at a live target, which are 2 completely different things, especially when the live target is your own brother. I did what I had to do and I would do it again if necessary. It seemed to stand still as Cindy and I looked at each other and then at the body lying on the floor. I realized that somehow Gordon had made a copy of the key to. I got inside my hut and realized he was going to kill me and Cindy. She said, "Scott, what are we going to do?" I told her to step away from the bed, put some clothes on and call 90011. The sheriff, criminologists and investigators arrived and the detectives interrogated us quite intensely and in an unfriendly way. As soon as I saw the sheriff when he arrived, I knew we were going to have problems because he was Gordon's right-hand man, a Republican like him. I should have realized that he was going to make the worst of what happened. They didn't arrest me right away, but it didn't take them long to decide that I had committed a crime regardless of what I told them. What Cindy told them about a week after the shooting was when they came to the house, arrested me and I was charged with. First, it turned out that Gordon still had powerful allies in the Republican Party, which controlled the legislature, the governor's office and the district attorney. They wanted Representative Luke's killer to be charged with murder, especially since the killer was the representative's hippie brother, politically. I'm not necessarily liberal on all issues, but I've been advocating for I had been close to those chains for a long time, and some of them were liberal. It seemed obvious to me that my crime was not so much killing my brother as opposing what he allegedly stood for. The state wanted me to be held without bail, but the judge set bail for me at $500,000 at the preliminary hearing. It took Cindy 3 months to raise the $50,000. I had to pay $000 to get out of prison, but it was money well spent. I still don't understand how experienced investigators could examine the scene in my bedroom and come to any conclusion other than self-defense. The defense argued that I wasn't dealing with city detectives, but county detectives, and that they believed Gordon's friends. Apparently, Gordon told a few of his friends that I invited him to come over that evening and that we were going to settle our differences. This was proven to be a blatant lie in court, but it was enough to convince the sheriff and the district attorney, who was up for re-election in just a few weeks, that I was the rebellious brother of the black sheep who framed Gordon for a fatal fall. The accusers also talked a lot. Cindy and I split up 2 days after the final divorce, which made people think we'd been having an affair all this time. But no one could prove we'd had sex before the shooting. My purchase of a pistol and target practice were important, but I never backed down from saying I was afraid for my life. Living in a village where you own a firearm is good practice. The state offered me 5 to 10 years for pleading guilty to. First I laughed at them and said it wasn't my fault. I knew what the authorities in this state were capable of and I knew that they could use a lot of resources against me. As soon as I declined their offer of a guilty plea, they became adamant in their intention to try me for first-degree manslaughter. I was charged with second-degree murder, but I have a lot of friends who helped pay for the services of Suzanne Jaworski, who is the best criminal defense attorney in the state. Gloria Miller, who is an old friend of mine, also joined my defense team on a pro bono basis. I also received widespread support from all over the country from friends I made in the music business and from other people I met along the way. Instruments and other people who were simply outraged by what they considered unfair prosecution. From the very beginning, I was supported by the media, especially the Daily City newspaper, which called my persecution a politically motivated vendetta. I was really lucky that I had good lawyers because the state somehow put together a lot of assumptions, hints, and scraps of facts to make up a pretty convincing case. If you already had doubts about me, the case was pretty convincing. Suzanne and Gloria did a great job of dismantling the state's evidence and arguments. They also brought in their crime scene experts, who showed that everything matched what I told the investigators that evening. The photos were especially damning. Cindy, I took photos of the night she ran away from Gordon, and I also collected evidence of his extracurricular activities. We wanted the jury to see the picture of Gordon that we had painted, an unstable hypocrite who was quite capable of breaking into my house and attacking me. It was a big gamble when I decided to speak up for myself. Suzanne said it was a risk because I could be subjected to aggressive cross-examination. I said that if I didn't believe in myself, how could I expect 12 strangers to believe in me? There were a few moments when the accusation got me a little excited, but mostly I kept calm, told my story and never deviated from it. I was never caught in a lie because I knew the truth was on my side. When it came time for the closing speeches, Suzanne spoke very clearly. She took every question the state brought up in support of. First, I was accused of first-degree murder and, in my opinion, the assistant district attorney in charge of the case went all out. He told the jury that I was jealous of Gordon's success, that I lured my brother to my house under the pretext of reconciliation and then shot him, ignoring the baseball bat that Gordon had in his hand. He died, and according to the prosecution, he took that with him because he was afraid of me. Our character witnesses basically destroyed this argument by bringing in old school acquaintances who said it was Gordon who had terrorized me over the years, not the other way around. I stood there confident that we had done everything we could, but still afraid. The jury was in session for a day and a half, and we didn't get a verdict. They didn't rush to a decision, but they didn't drag their feet, either. When the judge started reading the verdict, I closed my eyes, hoping they'd let me stay with the woman I loved or that I'd spend the rest of my life in prison. The accused was found by the people. Scott Luke was found innocent. The woman said at first I couldn't believe she'd actually said those two words that brought me back to life. Then I heard the courtroom explode into absolute chaos, and for a moment it seemed to me that a riot was about to begin. Gordon had ardent defenders among the gallery, but I had my share of them. There was some fear that Gordon's supporters would attack my supporters, and it could have led to a full-scale fight. A full-scale fight would begin in the midst of this bed. I turned to Cindy and we embraced with the passion of two newly liberated people. We lived apart but spent a lot of time together, and we got to know each other well. We really loved each other, and the fact that she and the girls supported me was a huge sign in my favor. It was a long, stressful ordeal, but now we could get married. Which was what she wanted, and I could adopt Sarah and Mary, which was what I wanted. I looked for my mom and sister, but they turned away and left. I thought I'd lost them forever, but that was fine with me. I never needed them, so I wasn't going to lose sleep over their feelings later. At a press conference organized by my lawyers, several members of the jury spoke strongly about. The state's version was pretty weak. In fact, one of the jurors said he couldn't believe the case had even made it to the grand jury. The foreman of the jury, who looked at me so sternly throughout the trial, told me what turned the case around for her. She was smiling broadly when Cindy's daughters came out in defense of Mr. Scott and said it told her everything she wanted to know. He's a good guy. Kids will tell the truth if you don't put pressure on them. These girls told the truth when they called Scott Luke their real dad that evening. Suzanne and Gloria invited us to dinner at a restaurant in the city center, and it turned into a victory party as many of my friends and supporters came to congratulate me. It was nice, but I was still feeling a bit drained. I was able to return home, but my life was still ruined. I managed to keep my house, but I had to sell many of my tools to raise money for protection. I also rented a small studio apartment to live in the city during the trial, which ate up most of my savings. Of course, during the year and a half it took for the case to go through the system, I couldn't work much, so my business collapsed. At the time, my only source of income was performing, but I wasn't good enough to make a living singing and playing bluegrass music. Despite being a free man, the trial cost me dearly, but I still had Cindy and her daughters to love me. During the last days of the trial, the girls were staying with Cindy's other sister, who lives in the city. When we arrived, Cindy's house was empty. The party ended, and Cindy invited me in and put the coffee on because she saw that I was restless. We sat together on her couch, sipping coffee in silence. There was so much I wanted to say, so much I wanted to do, but Cindy beat me to it. She finished her cup, set it aside, bent down, and pulled me to her. At first, she kissed me gently, but with increasing passion. In that moment, I was seized with wild lust. I was so stressed about the outcome of the trial that I'd been suffering from impotence for the previous few weeks. Cindy and I hadn't been in bed together for months, and I didn't even have the desire or the opportunity to satisfy myself. If I was inclined to do so, I kissed her back hard, letting my tongue do battle with hers as we wrestled on the couch. Now that I was free, I felt. My manhood was finally returning to life after several minutes of intense caresses. Cindy pulled away and stood up, telling me to relax, lie down and enjoy myself. She said this was for me, and with that, she stretched and let her hair fall over her shoulders in purple waves. She slowly unbuttoned her blouse and threw it aside, then unbuttoned her trousers and let them fall to the floor. I was just enjoying the view. Cindy was tall and slim, dressed only in the same blue bra and panties. She reached behind her back and unbuttoned her bra, tossing it aside, then got out of her panties. Cindy was swaying, naked in front of me. I stared at her breasts, sitting high and proud, her flat stomach, wonderful ass, long legs, and a shock of her rust-colored hair framed her penis. I was as hard as steel, even harder than I had been on that first night in my cabin. She knelt between my legs, reached up and slowly began to undo the buttons on my shirt. She ran her long nails over my chest, then took hold of my shoes and socks, and then reached up to undo my belt and take off my trousers. I was lying naked, ready to let her do whatever she wanted. She wanted to have sex with me. It looks good. It's nice, I said quietly. God, it's good to be with you when there's no cloud hanging over us. Cindy instructed me, I don't want to talk about anything right now. I just want to love you. We can talk later. We were free, completely free, free to be together without worrying about Gordon, without worrying about the possibility of jail. I could have been content. I could have kissed Cindy's lips forever, but I had something else on my mind. We kissed passionately, and in the midst of our passion, I couldn't hold back. I began to sob, finally releasing all the emotions I'd been holding back for so long. I killed a man, my own brother, and as a result, I was in danger of living in captivity. I knew that I was right to protect myself and my beloved as any man would. I still found it difficult to accept, though. After all, I was head over heels for Cindy, the woman I'd wanted for so long. I'd waited patiently all these years, doing the right thing and keeping my hands off her despite my feelings. Finally, I got it, but I had to face the possibility that I might have to live my life without it if I was convicted. While I was doing that, Cindy was just sitting there, silently. She hugged me gently and kissed my forehead, eyes, cheeks, and nose wherever my tears fell. I'm sorry, I said softly, finally coming to my senses. I guess I just needed to let something out. Don't apologize for crying, Cindy said. One of the things I love about you is that you're not afraid to cry. I've been worried about you for the last few months because you were like that, quiet and withdrawn. I've been waiting. I needed to control myself because if I showed how I really felt, I knew I'd have problems in prison. I said that when I was in prison before, I saw what they do to people who complain and act out. It's ugly in prison. You need to at least look strong because any sign of weakness will be used against you. But they left you alone, didn't they? Cindy said. That's because they knew what I'd done and respected it. I said prison justice is a funny thing. I killed the man who attacked me and the woman I loved, and they respected that in prison. But I also tried not to show fear, no matter how scared I really was. I was friendly with the worst guy in the place. We sat in silence, then I offered to take a shower. We went under the warm jets and just hugged, letting the soothing water take the tension was gone. The water was warm enough to be comfortable, and we wanted it to last. Cindy's thick, damp strands of hair fell over her face and shoulders, making her gorgeous eyes even more alive as I kissed her neck and breasts. She was very close, and I knew what would make her go over the edge. I pulled my face away from hers and turned her around so that she was facing the wall opposite. The shower outlet was a different story. If the connection lacked the previous intensity, it was more than compensated for by the great joy we felt at that moment. I blissfully used the love of my life under a rapidly cooling jet of water, not caring about anything in the world. Then they hugged each other by the shoulders and slowly went to bed. A year has passed since that fateful day when 12 jurors decided that I really killed my brother in self-defense. The defense chains and not just killed in cold blood. As soon as the girls' school year ended, a few weeks after the trial ended, Cindy and I got married in a quiet little ceremony in a chapel on the grounds of one of the city's colleges. We invited only a few of Cindy's close friends and family members. Some people doubted our relationship, but they quickly realized that I had made Cindy happier than she had ever been with Gordon. I didn't expect anyone from my family to show up, so I was surprised when my sister Karen arrived a few minutes before the service started and sat in the back. At the reception, she pulled me aside and we talked for the first time in almost 2 years. Scott, you know that your mother will never forgive you for what you did. She always thought that Gordon was an angel, and I always thought the same. I said, what about you? Do you still hate me? I'm just sorry that everything happened the way it did. It did, she said, with a sigh. But I can't spend the rest of my life hating you for defending yourself. I saw that it was coming to this and I kept telling him to leave it as it was, but he was obsessed with the idea of destroying you. After all, he really hated you. I said quietly, you know I have to blame Cindy for a lot of things. She was surprised because she always thought they got along well. Why do you say that? I was surprised to hear Cindy say that she blamed me for a lot of things. I always thought they got along well, so I asked her why she said that. She said that she didn't have the guts to cancel her wedding to Gordon after she met me. She also said that she knew we loved each other from the beginning. I think Gordon did too. I saw it that day in the shower, the way you looked at each other. I saw conflicting emotions in how she got through that day, and in the next few weeks. If she had done the right thing, she could have saved us all a lot of grief. It's water under the bridge, Karen. It's a lot to ask of a young woman who's always done what her parents want. They've already put a lot of money into the wedding and wanted her to marry Gordon, so I understand why she's reluctant to do anything that might upset them. I'm happy for you both and the girls, Karen said. I don't expect you and me to be buddies, but I want you in my life, Scott. I don't think my mom will be around for a while yet, and you're the only family member I have left. We hugged and parted as friends. Cindy and I went to Jamaica for our honeymoon, and that was all we hoped for when we returned. I got a letter waiting for me when I got back. It was from a famous country music star. It contained a check for $20. It seems that he read about my case and the difficulties I had with my business while I was fighting for my freedom. He talked about me with some people and wanted me to come to him in Nashville. I met him at his office on Music Row, and he offered to build me a workshop in the hills outside Nashville if I would move there and make custom tools for him. He also said that he said he'd put in a good word for me with his friends and invited me to take part in a few recording sessions. I spoke to Cindy about it and we agreed that starting over in a new place is the best thing we can do. I didn't want to part with my house, but Cindy never felt at home there, so I sold it and we moved to Nashville. That was all I could hope for right now. I've got more work. It's a lot to handle, but I'm playing with some of the biggest stars in the business and Cindy is helping with the bookkeeping. We try to spend as much time together and with the girls as possible. A few months ago, I officially adopted Sarah and Mary, so now I'm actually their real dad. Last week, Cindy came home with a surprise. Shortly after we moved to Nashville, she decided to have a tubal ligation operation. She had a tubal ligation operation and that same day she brought home the good news, she was pregnant. I'm finally going to have a child of my own with the woman I've loved since the first time I saw her. Cindy and I went through a lot to get to where we are now, having everything we've always dreamed of, but now we can look forward to the future. Hopefully we'll have a long, happy life together, we deserve it.